Did you hear our episode last week on creating a financial plan? Oh, well, we're back with more action steps. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Brittne Halford.
And I'm Dr. Lisha Taylor.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. Hey, Lisha, one of the most important financial tasks we do as doctors is protect ourselves, which means getting the right insurance. I recall purchasing my insurance policy just a few days before I graduated from residency. What was your experience?
So I got my insurance when I graduated from medical school right before I started residency. I actually called a few agents, but I had the best service from Pradeep Auto at PKA Insurance Group. He was super responsive and personable. Unlike some of the other agents, Pradeep actually got me quotes from all the major companies and actually took the time to explain the nuances in each of their policies. What I loved most is that he wasn't just this way for me. Whenever I would send one of my friends to him, he would not only speak to them, but he'd also let them know where to go or who to contact if there were better options or discounts available.
At PKA Insurance Group, Pradeep Auto and Matthew Peterson are independent brokers focusing on disability and life insurance. They excel in securing coverage for physicians and other medical professionals. Discounts on disability insurance can range from 10 to 40% depending on your situation. And there is now an A-plus rated carrier offering up to $10 million of life insurance without lapse. If you are very healthy with limited to no medical issues, approval is likely in 5 minutes. Reach out to PKA Insurance to discuss your disability or life insurance needs at www.pkainsurance.com or call 1-800-258-1018.
Oh my gosh, Lisha. I am in my office recording this episode as always. There's some changes that I've made recently in my home and my office. And I'm super excited because Brooke walked in my office yesterday and she's like, "Oh, mommy, your office is cute." I did it. So I've been spending some time decorating my home. And what I love most about this whole process is when I'm starting to feel good about the space that I'm in. So in creating new habits, I'm thinking very much about my built environment and those external forces that influence the output. And one of the things that I realized that there was a little bit of clutter, there's a little bit of mess, and I was just not very motivated to come into my space. So I added some frames on the walls, some artwork. I put some shelves. I'm going to put books that I want to read for this year and just kind of build the environment to help to foster a better me, not a new me, because I'm always going to be Brittne. But what I love about this, girl, is because I have an in-home office, is I can deduct all the stuff that I'm purchasing as a business deduction for our taxes.
I love that for you. I love that for you. You know, one of the things that I always try to do is think about how can I turn normal personal expenses into legitimate business deductions. And so taking things that I would have purchased anyway and saying, can I write this off on my taxes? Because it makes it a little bit better, or in some cases, a lot better, right? And so I am very happy for you. Tell us, what are some things that you got for your space to improve the mind frame that you have when you walk into the office and like increase productivity, that sort of thing? What are some things that you purchased?
Yes, great question. So one of the goals that I have this year is to read 4 books. I talked about that on the last episode. And so what I'm going to do is purchase the books now and put them on a shelf with the little trinkets. So they're visible. Oh, I got to read that book. This is my goal for this year, right? And so we talked about making it visible. Then other things that have been bothering me is that I have this desk. It's a standing desk, which I love because we sit down and we're working on our computers. And I don't know about you, but I think I don't have very good posture. My neck hurts and my back hurts. But because this is a standing desk, I can raise it up. I could do work. I can stand. It's helping my posture. And it's also allowing me to burn a few more calories. That has been phenomenal. And then I invested in a cord management system. So under the standing desk, there were no trays or anything. So I put some trays under the desk where I could have all of the cords there. And I also put wheels on the desk. So now I can move it around and have different looks. So you all might see on our social media podcast past episodes that maybe I'll roll it around and you can see my couch and my artwork. And right now you see my degrees behind me. So I set up kind of different looks within the office that will support having different feelings and helping me to be more productive and achieving my goals without all the chaos and the madness to manage.
I love this. I love this. Have you been tapped to assist your husband in doing the same for his home office, or you're just kind of leaving his space to him and you taking care of you?
Girl, his space is his. It is not mine. We talked about this on various episodes. We have this is yours, this is mine, and this is ours. And so in my office, I did not consult him at all. I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. And this is what I'm going to do. The same thing for his. I think maybe it was one of his clients or patients' daughters, but she's an artist. And he commissioned her to paint this huge painting of our children, Brooke and KJ. I mean, it is massive. If you come to our home in Boston, you will see it. It is massive. It is beautiful. And he wanted that in his wall. He put some Michael Jordan with a saying like, it's not about the outcome, it's about hard work or something like that. I don't know exactly what it says. But he put that on his walls. He put a little refrigerator in his office. So, like, he did what he wanted to do for his office and home. And I did what I wanted to do. And so that is his, this is mine. And then we have the rest of the house that is ours.
Love it. Love it. Love it. I am wishing you all the best with this home decoration process. And of course, hoping that you get all the tax deductions. I know your tax person is like, hey, send me them receipts. So wishing the best for you come tax time, or anything that you purchase in this year will be deducted off next year's taxes, but it still counts. So
Yes.
I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So now we want to move into a money mishap. Lisha, I was talking to someone recently about our podcast, and they saw that this segment was actually quite valuable because I think oftentimes we make mistakes with our monies and we feel like, oh, I'm no good with money. We say all these negative things to ourselves, who we are, what we can achieve, and all of that. But I think it's really important that we're transparent about the mistakes that we make so that others can learn from them, hopefully avoid them, but just also normalizing that mistakes are going to happen. We talk about failing fast, learning from them, picking yourself up, and keeping it moving. So share with us a money mistake that you had recently.
Yeah. So lately, one of the things that I'm trying to curb is my Amazon habit. And one of my confessions is that I think I've picked up a negative habit lately. So I have an iPad. One of the things that I have done recently on my iPad is use it to shop on Amazon. And so now, unfortunately, I've created that habit that whenever I grab my iPad, I start thinking about what do I need to add to my Amazon cart? Is I need to really like break that link of the chain. And so that's part of my confession is that every time I'm on my iPad, I just start thinking about what I need to add to my Amazon cart. So I think one of the things that I am going to try to do is one, set a barrier and say, just because you add it to the cart doesn't mean you have to press the purchase button. Maybe I just put it in the save for later instead of adding it to the cart. So I'm not seeing things that I feel like I need to purchase right now. Another thing, creating some sort of boundary. I'm not allowed to purchase anything on Amazon until I get paid. So it eliminates me from constantly making all of these purchases throughout the weeks. So these are some boundaries that I'm thinking about putting in place because my money mishap is that I'm spending way too much on things that I think may be useful, but may not be necessities in the moment. And I think over time, these things could add up. We talk about how sometimes it's these little purchases that kind of add up where we're constantly buying things that we may want but may not need. And so I think for me, it's putting some boundaries in place. So that might mean, like I mentioned before, putting it in the save to later area instead of adding it directly to the cart, putting some sort of boundary and saying, I'm not going to spend more than X amount of dollars this week, putting a measure in place where I'm only purchasing on the days that I get paid from side gigs instead of from my main gigs. So I make sure that the money that I make that is coming from my salary is still going to meet all of my financial priorities. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to do to curb this money mishap of frivolous Amazon purchases.
Frivolous Amazon purchases. I think we've all fallen into that habit. And I think it is very important that we consider how do we change our built environment again to support the habits that we desire. So as you were talking, the first thing that came to mind is delete the Amazon app. delete the app. And I don't know if you have an app on your phone or on your iPad, or if you go to the website and log in every time. Other ways to increase friction. I think just like we talked about atomic habits in the last episode, and it says to make things easy. And whenever I think about human factor engineering, you want to support what humans do well and prevent them from doing the wrong thing, is we add in friction. We see this in the systems that we work with in the hospital or in our clinics, right? We have best practice alerts. They have hard stops. You cannot order this amount of said medication because it's going to be dangerous for the patient. So for me, whenever I'm thinking about how do I mitigate to improve my habits, it's about adding in some additional friction and making some of the things that I don't want to do harder. So therefore it tells my brain like, okay, really, you got to add your credit card. You got to log in every time. Think about how much time you're spending on this. Do you really want this thing? Because what I find myself doing is purchasing something and not using it for 3 months. Well, why the heck did I purchase it? And then when I finally open the box, I can't return it when I find out that I actually don't need it. So I love that you bring this up because I think a lot of people are challenged by this as we have made online purchasing entirely too easy. And we have to be mindful of how to add in elements of friction to limit this not so positive behavior.
As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income, because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. One of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance.
Now, Pradeep and his team at PKA Insurance Group have a reputation for putting people over profits and always doing what's best. Do not hesitate to email PKA Insurance and his team today.
They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. All right, and now for our financial focus. Brittne, you and I spoke last week mainly on the first part of building a financial plan. And this week, we're going to kind of go in depth on the second part, which is really making sure that you put your money in the right places. In other words, having an optimal money allocation, having an optimal spending plan, however you like to frame it, also protecting yourself.
Yeah, Lisha, I think that this conversation is so important because when I think about the structure of my finances, creating those structures and systems to be successful and achieve your financial goal is just as critical as creating the plan. So thank you so much for opening up this topic. This is something that I'm really excited to hear more about how you structure things. So let's jump into it.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so first things first, I think it's helpful to remind ourselves that we cannot spend everything that we get, which I know it's like, well, duh. But, I always hear people say that there are a few money activities, a few things that we want to make sure that we're doing with our money. And spending it on the things that we desire is one thing, but it is not the only thing. And some of the other money activities are spending money on yourself, of course, paying your bills. So making sure that you're meeting any money obligations that you have, saving money for a rainy day, investing money so that it can grow over time, and giving away money so that you can leave an impact. And experience has taught me that there are very few people in this world that are good at all of those money activities. Some people spend a lot and they're not so good at repaying their financial obligations. Some people save a lot of money and they're not good at spending money and enjoying life's pleasures. Some people save a good amount, but maybe they are not investing, so that money isn't really growing. And then some people maybe are paying their bills and saving a little bit, but they're not giving as much money away. And so the impact that they're able to have with their finances may be limited. And so one of the things that I like to teach other physicians whenever I am giving a workshop or something is that, first of all, we can't spend everything that we get or we'll never be able to stop working. Once you realize that, you're like, okay, I need to put money away. And the activity that most people turn to, especially women, is saving money. And it's not that saving money is bad. It's that if you only save money, you're going to lose purchasing power over time because of inflation, right? Because things get more expensive over time. So that you not only need to save money, but you need to find a way to get that money to grow. And so as we're introducing this topic, kind of starting this part 2 on our financial plan, we really need to recognize these different money activities and making sure that we are carving out room in our budget or carving out room in our spending plan for all of them.
Lisha, I love that you say that money has five activities. Okay, people, I'm taking us back a little bit, but it reminds me of a conversation that I have with Brooke, and one of the activities that I have had her to start doing, both her and KJ, is I say that, okay, you can earn money, you can spend money, you can save it, you can give it away, and you can invest it. And so she now knows what all of the things that you can do with money. So I'm happy that we're having this conversation. And I think for anyone who is a parent, who's an auntie, who's a teacher, that these five money activities are something that is important that we start to learn even at a young age if we have not learned them as an adult. And I love how you're like, all right, spend some money on yourself and then spend it to pay other people, because I personally struggle with spending the money on myself. And when I think about, okay, now the lessons that I'm teaching Brooke, what I had them do was to create various jars and put the labels on the jars and start to take their money that they're earning through chores and things of that nature and allocate how much they want to give away, how much they want to spend, save, and invest, and to put that money away now in the little jars. And when I think about us and what we're doing as physicians, what we're doing as high income earners, as adults, we are also putting our money away in little jars. But if you have not created those little jars, i.e., bank accounts for you to allocate your funds, you're likely going to overspend, oversave. I don't know if you can necessarily overinvest, but or give too much away. And so I think this conversation of how do we put our money in those jars is very important so that we can create the life that we desire. And the life that we desire does not only mean about the life today, but the life that we desire in the future. So we want to be very thoughtful about living in the present, but also remembering that we need to put some coins away for the future.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And you know what? When I was a little girl, my dad had us do something very similar. It was like cash, like we would get a little allowance, which back in the day, I remember getting $3 a week for allowance, which kind of shows my age a little bit, and being really excited to get that $3. Now, $3, I don't even know if you could buy a candy bar at the store, but I remember being very little and getting like $3 a week or something. And my dad being like, okay, you got to put some money in an envelope for this thing, some money in an envelope for that thing. And so, yes, I love that. And we probably should do a whole episode about teaching kids about money and different ways to kind of do that, because it seems like you are already on that track. But I want to make sure that we are also making sure that we are doing that for ourselves as adults. And so I think as we're getting started doing this and setting up an optimal spending plan and financial plan this year, there are some action steps that we need to take. As you're carving out this plan, one of the first things you got to figure out is how much money do you need to live on and pay your mandatory bills each month? How much money do you need, bare bones, just to kind of function and maintain your standard quality of living? And this really came to a head because I was talking to one of my friends who used to work in consulting, and she was thinking about transitioning into another career. She said, you know what? I don't really love my job. I work obscene hours. I really want to quit and transition into something else. But you know what? This job in consulting pays me a very high salary. She's making $200,000-$300,000 a year. And she's like, you know what? I hate my job, but it's paying the bills right now. And it's giving me a good income right now. And as she was preparing to kind of transition, she said, I got to make sure I'm financially sound. And so we went through this process of saying, all right, I know that you bring home X amount of dollars, but how many of that do you actually need to live on? What is the amount of your mortgage? What is the amount of your car payment? What is the amount of any insurances that you have? How much money do you think you need to spend on food to sort of get by? How much money do you think you need to spend on gas and transportation and that sort of thing, right? Maybe if you nix the hair appointments and the nail salon appointments, right? Maybe you aren't investing as much, but bare bones, how much do you think you need to live on each month? And I remember at the time, I think she said something like $5,000 or $6,000 a month. And she was bringing home substantially more than that. And so for her, her first step was, all right, this is how much I need to live on each month. So that's the first number that she wrote down. And I would challenge anybody that's listening to this to do the same thing, right? Go through this same exercise, write down all of your expenses and figure out how much money you absolutely need to live on each month. And once you do that, then the next question is, how much do I have left over? How much do I have left over? For some people, you may have a lot left over and you're like, okay, I'm doing pretty good. Other people, you may not have much left over. Some people, you may find out that you're working in a deficit, right? And so we got to figure out, right, how much money are we spending right now? How much money do we need right now? And hopefully, when you answer that second question of how much is left over, you find that at least 20 to 30, maybe even 40% is left over. But some people, that percentage may differ, especially you've got children, depending on if you have a spouse house that also brings home an income. So it may differ depending on different people's situations. But what I'm trying to get at is you want to figure out how much money you absolutely need to live on each month. And then hopefully you've got a substantial percentage left over that you can use to do some of these other money activities with, that you can use to spend on yourself and you can also use to save and invest and give away.
That first step is critical. And honestly, Alicia, I feel like most of us don't really know what that number is. But if you don't know what current state is, how can you plan for the future? Right. And understanding what are your needs? What are your wants? I think that is critical because some people are like, I've done this exercise with many women. They're like, oh, well, I need to have a massage every week. I'm like, okay, maybe for some people who have like really bad back pain, it is critical that that massage is done every week. For most of us, like me, a massage every week is a luxury. That is not a need. And so sometimes we conflate our needs and our wants. And I would just ask you to be very critical about what your needs are. And then when you're evaluating how much you're spending every month, also for some of the needs like groceries, for example, we all need to eat, but that doesn't mean that we all need to eat organic everything. And so it's like really understanding what our needs and wants, even within certain categories, can be very helpful, especially if you're trying to achieve another goal. If you can ideally save 20% of your income, you're putting money away, your emergency fund is stacked. And I know we're going to talk about the levels of emergency funds, and you're putting 20% away for retirement, you're good. You don't necessarily need to have a specific to the cent number of what you need and what you're spending every month if your other things are appropriately allocated. But if you're trying to reach a goal, if you're trying to transition a job, if you're trying to scale back at work, then these numbers are critical to help you to get there.
Yeah, yeah. So once you do that first step, right, and you figure out how much money do you spend each month, and even more importantly, how much money do you have left over, then we can really start to do some of those other money activities. And I would venture to say that one of the most important money activities is to start saving, to have some money saved, right? You want money saved for emergencies, you want money saved for large purchases, you want money saved for upcoming expenses, things like that. And when it comes to saving, I have this philosophy that there's 3 levels of a savings account or an emergency fund. And I like to say that level 1 is surviving. Level 1 is surviving. This is sort of the level that I was at when I was in training, when I was a medical student, when I was a resident, when I wasn't making as much money. I've got an emergency fund that is level 1, which is me surviving. And what that means practically is I've got enough money saved that if an emergency happened, I got into a car accident or something like that, I had enough money to pay my insurance deductibles. I had enough money to sort of get by. And for me at that time in my life, that was somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. If I had a flat tire, that was enough to cover and allow me to buy a new tire or a full set of tires. If I got into a car accident, that was enough to sort of cover the deductible on the car insurance. If I got admitted to the emergency room, Lord forbid, that was enough to sort of cover my deductible for my health insurance to kick in and them to start paying. And so that was me surviving. It was me saying, hey, you know what? If I get into a car accident, I may not have enough money to buy a brand new car, but I got enough money where I can have my car insurance kind of kick in and help repair this thing. And so that is sort of my level 1. Once you get to that point where you are in their surviving mode, you've been able to save enough for insurance and deductibles and things like that. It's sort of managing or sustaining. And that is what I call a true emergency fund. In my eyes, that is saving 3 to 6 months of expenses. And that is for, Lord forbid, you quit your job or you need to stop working for a period of time. You have enough money saved to get you through. In medicine, we always talk about the importance of long-term disability insurance. Like if you got disabled or something and you were out of work for an extended period of time, you wanted that disability insurance to kick in so it can pay you an income while you're recovering. Well, what a lot of people may not know is that most of the time on those policies, you have to be out of work for at least 3 months. And then once you're out of work for 3 months, they still don't pay you until the end of the 4th month. And so you really need 3 to 6 months of expenses. Some people may even say 4 to 6 months of expenses saved up to kind of get you by through that period. And so level 1 of saving is kind of surviving. So that's enough for insurance deductibles and things like that, small emergencies and costs. Level 2 is managing and sustaining. And then I would say level 3 is more preparing for the future and getting into that surplus territory. And that's what I consider people saving for large expenses, a car that you want to purchase, a house down payment, a potential wedding, maybe an international vacation. And so that's sort of that third level. When I'm like helping people start to get their finances in order, we usually start saving and we go through these levels. Okay, level one is surviving. Hey, if you don't have enough to survive and pay insurance deductibles, let's make sure that we save up enough money for that first. Level two is managing and sustaining. Okay, as we're on level two, maybe we could start building up money for level two as we're doing some other things like maybe paying down debt. And then level three is, all right, once I have 3 to 6 months of expenses, let me make sure I'm preparing for my future. And so that is sort of how I think about savings. And that's how I walk other people through it.
I love that approach. It helps to have a great framework on what is the next step, what is the next goal that I'm striving towards. You've said on past podcasts that you're like, do as I say and not as I do. I'm going to be completely transparent with you all that at some point in time, we didn't have 6 months saved. Or when we were purchasing our recent home, we pulled a little bit of the money from the emergency fund to fund our down payment. And so if you're feeling, ooh, this is kind of mixed up, I just want to tell you that it was mixed up for me too. And but I really love this approach because what I found, at least after purchasing our most recent home, is that this emergency saving, like having a good amount in our emergency saving, saved us. It saved us because we had to replace the stairs. We had to replace the hot water heater. And then when we returned from Christmas, guess what? There was a leak. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do we have to replace this roof? Oh, Lord. But because we had enough emergency savings, we were still able to take our vacations. We were still able to invest every single month. We were still able to reach all of our financial goals for 2024. If I could say that this emergency savings is going to be critical to your survival and not even surviving, I think to you thriving and achieving all of your financial goals, then I cannot emphasize that enough. Now, I know sometimes, and we're going to get into this step, it's like you have other financial obligations and you see this money sitting there and you might think, how can I be using this money more effectively? I think that that is a great question for us to ask ourselves periodically as we are working through this checklist. And also just reminding yourself that yes, the money might be sitting, and we'll talk about where to put it so that it can grow the best. But yes, the money might be sitting, it's still serving a purpose. And so when you can focus on what the purpose is for each bucket of your money, and this is why the structure is very critical, you can understand that this is because of this reason and this is why I'm doing this. Not all money, as Lisha has mentioned in like the 5 things that you can do with money, not all money is meant to grow and to be invested and to be working actively for you. Sometimes money is working for your peace of mind. And I can honestly say from personal experience, having that emergency fund helped to mitigate any type of stress that we had in our household with purchasing this new home because we had that money set aside.
Yeah. I think that's a good point because there's this balance. Sometimes when financial advisors hear that you've got a substantial amount of money in cash, or just lay people, right? If you tell somebody, they may be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing, right? You should have that money invested. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And one of the things that sometimes is hard to really put a price on is peace of mind and saying, you know what, I could be investing in this or I could be investing in that. But right now, it gives me more peace of mind to know that I've got this amount of money in savings so that if anything comes up, I am taken care of. And I have found, and the studies have sort of backed this up, that women tend to feel this way more often than men. Women tend to save a substantial amount of money more in cash than men do. Now, we'll also talk about some of the downsides of that. Because women tend to save more, right? They tend to invest less and have less wealth over time. So we can talk about some ways to mitigate that in a second. But as we sort of wrap up this part on savings, I really want to pose this question, which is where do you put your savings? Most of us probably have some sort of savings account that is connected to our checking account, that is connected to some main bank that we use for our direct deposit from work and things like that. But I really want to challenge you to consider, is that the best place to keep your savings? For me, I have a small amount of savings in a regular savings account connected to my bank, but it's a very small sum. It's usually money that I know I'm going to spend within the next month, whether it is for some expense or something like that. But usually the money that I have in my true emergency fund or for things that I know I'm not going to purchase for a while, that is usually in a high yield savings account or a money market fund for me. Think of a money market fund as a savings account that pays you a high amount of interest that's connected to a brokerage account. So a brokerage firm like Vanguard or Fidelity. Think of a high yield savings account as a savings account that gives you way more interest that's usually at some sort of online bank. And so I have money in a high yield savings account. I've got money in a money market fund. I don't have certificates of deposits or CDs just yet. I don't purchase individual bonds currently. I purchase bond funds. We can kind of go over that in subsequent episodes where we're talking about different things to invest in. But I really want to challenge you to say, if you are somebody that's got a substantial amount of money sitting in a regular savings account, you might want to consider putting that in a different kind of savings account that can allow you to earn even more interest. Another thing to consider is not only where to keep that savings account, but how many different savings accounts do you want to have? Some people like having it all together in one account. It's easy to find. I know where the money's at. Other people like me need to separate it into different goals. It helps me to learn that I am working towards different goals. And so I've got a savings account that I've retitled my vacation fund. I've got a savings account that I've retitled my emergency fund. I've got a savings account that I've retitled future real estate investments or international vacations, new car. So if you are saving for a large goal, sometimes it is helpful to actually log into your bank and rename that account so that every time you put money in it, you can see yourself working towards a goal. And so I'm the kind of person where I like to have different savings accounts for different purposes. Maybe you are like me in that regard, or maybe you like to keep it all together. But aside from that, as you think about saving money, are you saving at each level, and which level are you currently on, right? Are you on step 1, surviving, step 2, managing, sustaining, or step 3, sort of preparing for the future? And then where is that money that you're keeping in savings? Is it in the right place? Is it in the best place? And then how many different kinds of accounts do you want to have? And so let's start looking at that and thinking about those questions.
One of the things that I do is, like you, I separate it out. And I remember I was coaching someone, and she's like, girl, that's too many accounts. But if you create them in the same place and it's kind of the same login, then really it just matters to the bank more so than you how many accounts they are, because they're serving a purpose. And what I like to do is not only name them, but I like to say the amount that is needed in all of them. Because I don't know about you all. I do a calculation. I'm like, dang, what did I say? How much do I need for this thing? I put the amount in the title. So once I get to that amount, I'm done. Because you mentioned is that women save more and we invest less. And what I can see happening is that once we start to accumulate these dollars, I don't know if this happens to you, Lisha, but I know this happened to a couple of my clients. And even just like in this household, we're like, we got us money saved and it's visible and it makes you feel good. Like, oh, I accomplished that goal. And then you're like, oh, well, I get to save more. And then you oversave. And so Lisha mentioned some of the drawbacks of over accumulation in a savings account, meaning that, yes, it might be a high yield savings account or a money market fund that's returning 3 to 4% right now, but you could get much more in the stock market or investing in other things like real estate, et cetera. And so we don't want you to just oversave and then you're not making your money grow passively, which is one of the drawbacks of just having money in a savings account opposed to having that money invested. What I would encourage you to do all the things that Lisha talked about, but also put the amount there. So if you're saving for a new car, what is the car that you want to get? Do you want to get a used car? Do you want to purchase a brand new car? And what is the cost of that? And put that there so you don't oversave in one of these accounts. Once it's fully funded, you move on to the next step.
Yeah, yeah. And so as we're recapping, right, the first thing we talked about was that you can't spend it all. There's different money activities. And so you got to figure out what is the minimum amount that you need to live on each month and how much is left over. Hopefully you've got 20, 30, 40% left over. If you don't have at least 20%, then maybe you need to reevaluate your quality of life and how much you're spending each month. Next, we just talked about savings and seeing what level of savings are you at, writing down the amount of money that you have in different savings accounts, determining whether or not you still need to be saving money or whether you can move on to the next step, which is investing, and really starting to make sure that you keep your savings in the right accounts. And maybe you separate it like Brittne and I do, or maybe you keep it all together. The next money activity is really to start investing. Brittne, I think you highlighted that perfectly in that sometimes we tend to oversave instead of branching out into investing. And I find that people do that for a few reasons. One, they really think they may use the money soon, and so they want a large amount saved for a future expense. Sometimes it's because they don't know how to invest. But a large reason is because they are nervous about losing their money. And so they say, you know what, I'd rather be safe and I know it's there than take the risk. And so we've really got to branch and talk about smart risks and how to really start investing in a way that is effective, but also passive, doesn't take much of our time, and so gives us good returns. And so again, you can't just save money. Because of inflation, things get more expensive over time. And so you need your money to keep up with inflation. You need your money to grow so that you can maintain purchasing power over time and start to build wealth. And so the first question that I have for you is, are you investing money? Are you currently investing? If so, how much money are you investing? What are you investing in? What accounts are you using? We'll talk more about this next week, but those are some preliminary questions, right? Are you currently investing money? The general advice is to invest at least 20% of your gross income for retirement so that you can retire at a decent age. Are you currently doing that? When I have asked physicians these questions, are you investing? What accounts are you using? What percentage of your income are you investing? They usually look at me with big eyes and blank stares because they have no idea what's going on. And these are really smart physicians, right? Either they leave it up to somebody else and they haven't checked in with that person in a while. They haven't started investing and they're sort of embarrassed to tell me that. Or they are investing, but they have no clue how and in what. And so I would challenge you to sort of take charge of your financial life. And what's funny, Brittne, is when I ask people, especially doctors, are you investing? Some of them say no. And I think they just don't realize that they are investing. I find that a lot of doctors do not consider contributing to work retirement accounts investing. And it totally is, provided that your money is actually being invested when you contribute to it, which is something interesting. A lot of people make the contributions, but they don't actually select how they want the money to be invested. Employers have sort of gotten wind of this. And as a result, they usually have a default investing option. That's not the case at every place, right? Some people have been contributing for years and that money's just sitting in a savings account because they've never selected how they want the money to be invested. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, Lisha, that's me, maybe check in with HR, human resources, send them an email and say, hi, I know that I'm contributing to the work retirement accounts. Can you give me some information about how my money might be invested? Do you know what the default investing option is? But as you are thinking about this and thinking about answering this question, are you investing, right? Are you contributing money to your work retirement accounts? If you are contributing, do you know the percentage that you're contributing each month or with each paycheck? Is that 20% when you add it up over the full course of the year? Is that 20% of your gross income? If it's not, how can you increase that amount? Somebody who's a physician, maybe you can't fit 20% of your gross income in your work retirement account, so you might have to use other type of investment accounts. And so for this step, I really want you to take inventory of any investment and investing accounts that you have.
It's so funny that you mentioned that most people don't consider themselves investors, because I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, they just don't know. Like, oh yeah, 401k, I put money in my 401k. Well, that money, like you said, if it is invested, then it is invested and you are investing. And I think it's really important that we take inventory of where we are. When we're thinking about work retirement accounts, I just want to let everyone know that it's a new year. So new year sometimes means new contribution limits. So let's just talk about those contribution limits so that you can make the adjustment. So when you go into your account, you see how much is there, and then you can change how much you're actually contributing so that you can max it out every year. So for 2025, 401k, 403b, contribution limits are $23,500. And if you are doing a backdoor IRA, which we'll talk about, then that contribution limit is $7,000. So just to kind of give you all a ballpark of what those tax advantage retirement account numbers are. And Lisha, when you think about how much or how little you might be investing, I think it's really important that we consider that number and conceptualize when we want to retire. Because if you have 40% left over, as Lisha talked about in kind of that first step, then you have to think about, could I drive this percentage that I'm investing up and invest more without sacrificing my joy, without sacrificing my livelihood? If you can, then you can likely retire early. Now, we've talked about kind of FIRE and some of the benefits of doing that. FIRE is financially independent and retire early. But I just want to say, when you are calculating the percentage that you're investing every year, I want you to also ask yourself, am I maxing it out? If not, can I max it out? And if I am maxing out my accounts, how could I potentially contribute more without sacrificing joy? Because that means that you might be able to retire a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Brittne, I want to give a quick caveat that the numbers you mentioned are for people under the age of 50. And so if you are listening to this and you're a little bit more seasoned, shall we say, you can invest even more in your work retirement accounts and in your IRAs each year. And so as we start thinking about this step, right, you're starting to invest. We're going to do a deep dive in investing next week. But right now, I just want you to take inventory. How many jobs with work retirement accounts do you have access to? Are you in one job and you're salaried at that job? If so, do you have access to a work retirement account there? If you have multiple jobs because you do side gigs and things like that, do you have access to multiple retirement accounts? At those jobs, do you have automatic contributions set up where you're contributing a set percentage or a set dollar amount each month or each paycheck? If so, how much is in the account right now? Maybe you got a lot more money in that account than you realize. How much is invested and how is it invested? I think I told this story on an earlier podcast that I was working at the urgent care with somebody who used to work in the UCal system like I used to, and she had no clue that the entire time she was there, which was for 3 or 4 years, that she had been investing in the work retirement account. She was thrilled to find out she had tens of thousands of dollars in an account that she had no clue about. And so I'm going to challenge you to say, hey, any job that you've had, whether it's your current job or prior jobs, even if you didn't think you were contributing, you may want to do a little digging and see if maybe indeed you were. And so take inventory, see how many jobs with work retirement accounts you've got access to, and whether or not you've got automatic contributions set up. Oftentimes, they tell you these things when you're first completing your new hire paperwork, when you're doing all your onboarding. And I know that you've got like 20 million pieces of papers and forms to fill out, so you probably may not have been paying as close attention as you would have liked. And so if that's the case, just contact HR. Hey, what's the default automatic contribution, right? Have I been contributing to this thing? Do I have thousands of dollars sitting somewhere? That's some information you kind of want to know. And so I would challenge you to do that. The other thing is to think about any IRAs. IRAs are individual retirement accounts like a traditional IRA or Roth IRA. Do you have money in those accounts? So funny, I was talking to another physician. I asked her if she was doing her Backdoor Roth IRA, and she kind of looked and she's like, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure I got money in some IRA. And I said, okay, do you have a financial advisor? And she says, yeah, I got one. And I said, well, why don't you ask her? Ask her if you've got money in an IRA. And she did. And she said, hey, Lisha, I got money in this account. You came back to me. And I said, do you know what kind of IRA it is? And she was like, nope, I don't know what kind of IRA it is. And I said, okay, well, go back to her and ask her, is it a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA? And of course, she couldn't remember those words. I said, well, write it down. I'm going to write the exact question down. And she said, my advisor says that I've got money in a traditional IRA. And I said, you know what? I am glad that you're investing. However, another question you need to ask your advisor is if you are still contributing to a traditional IRA or if now you're doing this backdoor Roth process. And she says, Lisha, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I will try to ask her. And what we discovered is that she was still contributing to a traditional IRA. And I said, is there a reason why you're still contributing? And of course, she didn't know the answer to that question. She said, well, I don't know the answer, but I think it's because I get a deduction for it. And I said, do you happen to know how long you've been doing this? And she said, yeah, I've been doing this since I was a resident. And I said, you know what? It's entirely possible that when you were a resident, because your salary was much lower, maybe you were getting some sort of tax deduction contributing to a traditional IRA each year. But now that you're in attending, you no longer get a tax deduction for contributing to a traditional IRA. And so the best bet for you may be to do this backdoor Roth IRA process, put money in a Roth IRA in an indirect method, which will allow you to invest money over time, and that money will never be taxed again. And so I walked her through it, and she said, Lisha, that sounds like a lot of steps. It sounds complicated. This is why I pay somebody, right? And I was like, I get it, girl. But my concern is that you may be missing out on an opportunity. My concern is that although your financial advisor may be fantastic and you may love her, that she may not have told you about this other method. Because you know what? This backdoor Roth IRA process is not very common to a lot of people. A lot of financial advisors may be dealing with people that make much lower salaries than you do. And so they may not have to worry about this. And so you really want to ask her about it. And if she's not having you do this backdoor Roth IRA process, it may be something to consider. And so I would challenge you all who are listening to this episode with the same thing. Do you have money in an IRA? If so, what kind of IRA is it? Is it a traditional or Roth IRA? How are you making those contributions? Are you actually doing the backdoor Roth IRA method? And so I would challenge you with that. So first step is work retirement accounts. How much money do you have invested in those? Next step is IRAs. How much money do you have invested in those? And then any other kind of investment accounts, right? If you do locums work, if you make some 1099 income, maybe you have a solo 401k or a SEP IRA. How much money do you have in those things? Are you invested? Did you download apps like Robinhood or Elvest, or do you have a robo-advisor? If so, how many individual stocks do you own? How many index funds do you own? Do you own any real estate properties, any Bitcoin, right? Write down the different kind of investments that you have and the different kind of accounts that you have access to, and just figure out, where do you currently stand?
This is so much goodness. And I'm so glad that you were able to coach that person through that conversation. And Lisha, just reflecting on the conversation, you raised a couple of points that are just so dear and near to my heart that I teach people all the time. I recently gave a talk to the hospitalists at U of Chicago. And one of my mantras throughout the talk is if you can do medicine, you can do money. So feel empowered to spend some time with your finances to learn about these things, to make a list of questions that you may not know and figure out what it is that you don't know. Then do the research to figure out what you have to learn about it and learn the things, and then go to the experts and ask those questions. Because what I have found time and time again with coaching clients, with people that I've talked to, with myself personally, is that nobody, not your financial advisor, not your mama, not Lisha or Brittne, cares more about your money than you do. And so it is imperative that even if you're involving experts in your finances, even if you're delegating those tasks to someone else, they do not know your financial profile as intimately and all of the details as you do. And they do not care about your tax burden, about how much you're going to be investing more than you do. So it is really imperative that you educate yourself, because even with communicating with some financial professionals within our community, they have gotten some details wrong.
Yeah.
And I have to go back and ask them, oh, well, what about this? And what about that? So I think that that's really important.
I agree with you, Brittany, obviously. And one of the things that I've realized over time as I have coached my friends and other physicians through these conversations with their financial advisors is that sometimes the financial advisor may not be doing things in their best interest. And it's not always like the financial advisor is trying to trick them, right? Or trying to get over on them. It's just that sometimes the financial advisor may not be aware. Like you said, no one's going to care more about your money than you do. And so you've really got to take charge of this. And just again, you don't have to start complicated. You don't have to start with buying individual stocks. All I'm asking you to do in this step is just take inventory. What accounts do you have access to, including retirement accounts that you may have had access to at prior jobs? Where is that money located? How much money is in those accounts? IRAs, we talked about traditional versus Roth, other kind of investment accounts, SEP IRAs, solo 401ks, individual stocks, index funds, real estate properties, Bitcoin. What is the value of all of your investments? So take inventory, because next week we're really going to do a deep dive into how can we optimize that? What are some things we think about as we start investing? But for right now, as we're creating this financial plan for 2025, take inventory of what you currently have so we can know where you stand right now.
I just want to add, Alicia, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to add a couple of other things. As you're understanding your accounts, write down a few more things. One is, what is your match? Is your match based upon your contribution, or do you get a match without contributing anything? Also, if you're emailing HR, ask about vesting periods. And I know we've talked about this in some episodes, but different types of vesting. That means, when does that money effectively become yours? That match money become yours. There is kind of this cliff vesting where after 3 years, 100% of your money becomes yours. Or if you leave after 2 years, none of it is yours. Or there might be this kind of graduated scale where if you stay for 1 year, you might get 25%, or after 2 years, 50%, etc. That is really important to know, including your match, and then what is the vesting period. Also, I would just say go back and listen to our episode number 6, where we talk about the Roth IRAs, a backdoor Roth IRA, or Roth IRAs in general, and backdoor Roth IRA, and some of those other logistical things that you need to be considering, such as the pro rata rule. So if you have a traditional IRA or a SEP IRA, you may have to pay extra taxes on any money that you put into a backdoor Roth IRA. So these are some of the details that I know we'll get into more in the future episodes and that we talked about in past episodes. So if you want to learn kind of the differences between a Roth IRA, traditional IRA, and doing that backdoor, then go back to episode number 6 where we talk about that.
Yep. We talked about the different money activities, right? Step 1, how much money you need to live on each month and seeing how much is left over. We talked about the different levels of savings, figuring out how much money do you have in savings, how much money do you need in savings, where are those savings accounts located. We just talked about investing, right? Taking inventory of your investments. Now we're going to talk about making sure that you're spending money on the right things. We talk about spending money. Sometimes we talk about paying our bills. Sometimes we talk about paying for housing, buying food, discretionary spending, that sort of thing. And I really want you to sort of take inventory of what are the things that you are spending money on. What are some of your biggest expenses each month? Is it the amount of money that you pay in housing? Is it insurances? Is it the amount of money that you spend in bills like electricity and internet and cable and things like that? But one of the things I always challenge physicians with is making sure that you are also spending money to protect yourself. And that means having enough insurance and the right kind of insurance. When I am speaking to physicians, I do a whole series on this. It's an entire talk that I give on the right kinds of insurances and the right amounts of those insurances. And of course, it differs for each person depending on your needs and your family structure. But I think it's really valuable to know how that number may differ as you go throughout your life. How do you figure out how much you need? And I kind of go through that in my talk. I won't go through all the nitty gritty of that right now on this episode, but I do want to make sure that we list out at least the different kinds of insurances that you want to make sure that you have. Number one is health insurance. I know that may seem very basic, especially given that we are two physicians here on this podcast. But what I found is that when people are transitioning jobs, they may not always have health insurance. When people are going from trainee to attending, they may not always have health insurance. So making sure that you've got some sort of health insurance and knowing what kind you have. As a physician, you'll be surprised the number of patients that are distraught to know that they need referrals for specialists. They can't just make an appointment with a specialist themselves, or the amount of people who get surprising bills that they did not expect because they did not realize that they were enrolled in a high deductible health plan that required them to spend X amount of dollars out of pocket before their insurance kicked in. The amount of people that come to me and they get bills or whatever because I was out of network or they were out of network and they didn't know what in-network versus out-of-network was. And so really paying attention and looking at what kind of health insurance do you have? If you are a female and you get pregnant and have a baby, how much is that actually going to cost you? If you decide to freeze your eggs, how much is that actually going to cost you? If you need to go to the emergency room and happen to get admitted to the hospital, how much is that going to cost you, right? Making sure that you have insurance and knowing some of the details, maybe not every detail memorized, but knowing where to access that information so that you don't get surprise bills. I think health insurance is really important as is just one of those first kinds of insurances that you want to make sure you have.
Health insurance is super important. And when I talk to people about their finances and making sure that they have the appropriate insurances, it helps you to increase your longevity and decrease your liability. So we talked about peace of mind and having that emergency fund. This is one of those things that sometimes we don't like paying it. I'm guilty of this too. It's like, really, man, I haven't gotten in a car accident. And how long do I really need that umbrella insurance policy? You have to have car insurance to drive in Massachusetts, but do I really need this amount of car insurance? Do I need that life insurance, disability insurance? And I would say, yes, you do. It is one of those things that you don't need it until you need it. So let's make sure that we are preparing just like you prepare with your emergency fund. Having the appropriate assurances is so important. Lisha, when you talk about insurance, I think it's really important that we understand the details because we get some things through our employer, but it's also very important to understand when is it appropriate for us to have our independent policies and for us to have the flexibility to leave an employer that we don't like and not have to stay at an underpaying job or a job that is causing us to feel burnout and stress and other facets of our lives just because we're dependent on them for these insurances and these protections. And I think that this is a question worthwhile asking yourself if your partner to have that conversation with your partner, because again, you don't need it until you need it. And sometimes with how things are insured with our employer, it's not as much coverage as we actually desire. So asking the details, just putting this as a checklist. One of the things that I've started to do in creating financial goals and my goals in general is to have like a deep work checklist and have a shallow work checklist. So this could be a shallow work assignment for you to put on there to email HR, and then a deep work assignment for you to actually explore how much you need and to make sure that you have the appropriate coverage. And I would argue to say that having the emergency fund is one of the most important tasks that we can make sure that we complete in Q1 of this year.
Yeah. So as we're thinking about insurance, thank you for bringing up that point, Brittne, about how we get some insurance from our employer. And I think the default thought is, oh, I've already got that. My employer pays for that. And we may not realize actually your employer, the amount that you would get from your employer is insufficient. You actually do need your own policy. And so as we talk about that, health insurance, we mentioned malpractice insurance. I find that most people's malpractice insurance through their employer is pretty good. The problem is they don't know what kind to have. Some malpractice insurance only covers you while you work there. Other malpractice insurance will will cover you even if a patient sues you after you leave that employer. So you want to see what kind of malpractice insurance coverage you have and make sure that you're fully covered. Umbrella insurance you mentioned, right? That's that insurance that protects you against lawsuits outside of work. If someone's over your house and your dog bites them and they sue you, if you're having a house party and someone slips on glass and they break their arm and they sue you, if you're in a car accident and they realize you're a doctor and they decide to sue you, the umbrella insurance will kick in and cover you for that. Umbrella insurance is very, very cheap. I think I pay like $20 a month, maybe for like $1 million policy. And so it's pretty cheap. The problem with umbrella insurance is that you have to get enough insurance on your car insurance policy in order to be eligible to purchase umbrella insurance. Let me explain this a little bit further. For most people's car insurance, what happens is they shop online, Progressive, State Farm, Geico, you name it. They put in their car, they're making their model, blah, blah, blah. And they look at default policies and they compare policies, right? Progressive's going to charge me this amount. Geico's going to charge me this amount. State Farm's going to charge me this amount. And they choose the one they like. Problem is that a lot of people don't necessarily look at the details and the nuances of that policy. And most people, I find, do not have enough liability protection. That means if you get in a car accident and you are deemed at fault and somebody, the person you hit, sues you, the liability protection for most people's car insurance is very low. It's like $10,000. Chances are if somebody's suing you, they're going to sue you for more than $10,000. So you got to increase the liability protection on your insurance policy in order to be eligible to purchase umbrella insurance. And if you're not sure what that needs to be, if you contact these car insurance companies, State Farm, Geico, Progressive, that sort of thing, and you say, hey, I want to be able to purchase umbrella insurance. Can you tell me how much my car insurance needs to be or how much I need to increase my car insurance policy by in order to be able to purchase that? They'll let you know real quick because they know what those numbers are. And so just make sure that you're covered. So we talked about car insurance, umbrella insurance, malpractice insurance, health insurance. Next things I want to make sure you that we have enough of is disability insurance, especially long-term disability insurance. Something happens to you, get in a car accident, you get diagnosed with arthritis, you get diagnosed with a chronic illness, maybe you're pregnant and you're on bed rest, these sorts of things where you cannot work for long periods of time. You want to make sure that you've got enough disability insurance to cover you. This is usually one of those insurances that your employer will offer you a small portion for free at your job, but you likely need to have your own individual long-term disability insurance policy as well to cover you. And of course, our sponsor for this episode, Pradeep Auto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are happy to set that up for you if you don't yet have it. Another thing is life insurance. If someone depends on your income to live, whether it's your spouse or your kids or other family that you help support financially, you may want to consider life insurance. I won't get into the nitty-gritty on the different kinds of life insurance, but typically we recommend term life insurance. And again, our friends at PKA Insurance Group will help you set that up. The last kind of insurance, which I think has come to a head lately as we're recording this episode, is having sufficient housing insurance or renter's insurance. My heart goes out to family and friends and just people that were impacted by the California fires. One of the things that came to a head is whether or not people had the right kind of housing insurance and enough housing insurance. Usually most people have a general housing insurance policy, but what we've realized is depending on where you live, you may need additional insurance on top of that. Whether that's fire insurance, if you live in an area like California that is more prone to fires, whether that's hurricane insurance and flood insurance, if you're like me and you're from Florida, where hurricanes and floods are a little bit more common. And so you really want to take a look what kind of insurance you have for your home or where you live and make sure that it's sufficient.
Fantastic, Lisha. Thank you for breaking that down for all of us. All right. And now it's time for our fun money. Lisha, kick us off here, girl. How you spending your money for fun?
I am upgrading my kitchen supplies. And I know you're like, that is not fun. For me, it kind of is. So one of the gifts that I got for Christmas is this new set of cookware, which, girl, I needed. Okay. The cookware that I had was given to me when I was a medical student. All right. So it was already quite used. And I used it for 4 years as a medical student. And then my roommate at the time was like, you can just keep this. And I kept it and had been using it. And that cookware needed to go. I'm embarrassed to say the bottom of the pan was kind of scraped. Like I would cook things and I'd be like, this can't be healthy. So one of the things that I wanted was some upgraded cookware. I have some friends that had some ceramic cookware and it just looked nice. Things were not sticking to the pan. It was easy to clean. It was colorful. And I was like, that's what I want. So that was on my wish list and Santa brought it to me. And so I have this new line of ceramic cookware from the Green Pan Company, which is a little pricey. So thank you, Santa. And it's pink. It's my favorite colors, pink and gold. And I love cooking in it. I've already used it and it's been great. So I've been upgrading the rest of my supplies. I've got different, like the cooking utensils that are upgraded. I bought better cutlery that's a little upgraded so it's not, rusted or anything like that. I got new cutlery. I bought some glass Tupperware. I've been having plastic Tupperware, which you know is not healthy because you cook spaghetti one time, the whole Tupperware is orange, and you're like, that can't be healthy, right? To be heating up plastic all the time. So I'm like, you know what? New year, new me. I'm going to be healthier. And that includes cooking with healthier utensils, using glass Tupperware, that sort of thing. Got a new colander. So I need to get a new cutting board. So I'm just very excited about upgrading my kitchen utensils. Going back to last week when we were talking about atomic habits, one of the things that he talks about is making it attractive to do the habit, to do the thing you want to do. And I want to be healthier. I want to cook more often. And so making it attractive. Every time I pull out those green and gold pans, I'm excited to cook. I'm excited to use my new cooking utensils and cookware. So that's one thing fun that I'm doing with my money.
Lisha, every time we talk about this, I'm like, oh, that's resonating with me because I actually went shopping when I was home with my girlfriend. And my friends, I think I've talked about them on past podcasts. They have fantastic taste in clothes and home furnishing and all of the things. I, like you, have these pans that are so old. My husband sent me something on Instagram that talked about the black plasticware having carcinogenic properties. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not trying to give my family cancer, so let me throw this away. And I literally threw them all away. But now it's like, okay, what I'm going to cook with now. Thankfully, we do have some wooden spoons and things of that nature, but I need a few more. I need to replace the pans because you're right. Things are becoming harder to clean, and making it attractive is simplifying the process. So if these things are going to be easier to clean, then it's going to be more attractive for me to cook dinner. So I love that. And please share your list with me, because one of the things of making things easy is somebody could give me a list of all the things. Shoot, share your Amazon cart. Put the things in there again for me. Share it and then delete the app, okay? Give me your Amazon cart so that I can purchase them myself. If there are any moms who listen to this podcast, I'm sure you're relating to me right now. The summer is quickly approaching. And you might be thinking to yourself, it is only January. Brittne, what are you talking about? But summer camps, you got to register for those very early. So that's what I've been spending my fun money on, is trying to cultivate a very comprehensive but fun experience for Brooke this summer and registering for all of these summer camps. So I have a full-on spreadsheet of all the weeks that she's off for summer and the cost of the camps and how much I'm spending and what types of experiences she's going to have. So that is what I'm doing for fun money.
I love that. I love that for you. I will send you some of the cookware stuff that I had been purchasing in case you are interested. If somebody is listening to this episode and you have some recommendations of things that are cost effective but also very high quality, send them to us. Our email is wealthmindedmd@gmail.com. We do read those emails. So thanks so much for listening to this episode today. And of course, we can't wait to come back to you again next week.
Hello, and thank you for listening to our podcast. And because of that, we have something for you, our Wealthy Minds Blueprint.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I wish I could be better with money? Do you want to start investing and saving for retirement, but keep delaying because you don't know where to start? Our Wealthy Minds Blueprint is here to help.
This guide will teach you what you didn't learn in your training, so you can stop being confused about money and start taking what we call wealthy-minded action.
We'll help you become a master of your finances and simplify investing so you can get started today. Take control of your financial future by downloading your free copy of the Wealthy Minds Blueprint now and start building the wealth you deserve.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittne Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisha Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, you know. So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.
One of the most important things you can do is ensure you have long-term disability insurance. Long-term disability insurance secures your income if the unexpected happens and you are unable to work due to medical illness, chronic conditions, or an accident.
Unfortunately, all insurance agents aren't created equal. Some of them are so focused on making a sale that they fail to reveal certain necessary information, tell you about discounts available, or clearly explain the process. Pradeep Botto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best.
If you need life insurance or disability insurance, reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve.